Hello friends and welcome back to the Dork Side. I'm the Dork on the road and today it's the comparison several of you have asked for. Let's talk about the KLR 650 versus the Honda Africa Twin from a guy who has owned both bikes. I'm the Dork on the road and I want to be your internet riding buddy, so please consider subscribing. First off, let me apologize because the title of the video says from a guy who owns both, and truth be told, I'm actually a guy who's owned both. I sold my Africa Twin about 2 months ago. I have 2 years of experience on a 2016 first generation Honda Africa Twin, and I just bought recently and have been riding since my 2022 KLR 650 Adventure, and I got about almost 2,000 miles on it. So few of you have asked me to compare the two bikes, and I'm happy to do that based on my experience. This is going to be a little bit more of a quick and dirty and less of an in-depth comparison than I've done on some other motorcycles. I'm not going to do the stats and stuff for you because that's easy enough to find on the internet. What I want to focus on is what it feels like to own and ride both of these bikes. Let's start off by talking about what the KLR does better. The KLR is a lighter motorcycle and it's much easier to maneuver both on the road, on the trail, in a parking lot, and in your garage. And I mention the weight first and foremost because there's a psychological component to a motorcycle that feels heavy. That was something that was in my mind the whole time I owned my Africa Twin, and one of the big reasons why I decided I wanted to try something else. The KLR overall feels lighter, easier to maneuver while you're riding it and while you're pushing it around the garage. So much easier to move. The KLR is a far less expensive motorcycle. The MSRP on a 2022 KLR 650, starting MSRP is around $7,000. You cannot get into a Honda Africa Twin for anywhere near that cheap. In fact, you can buy two KLRs for what some of the Africa Twins go for. So if price is a consideration for you, obviously the KLR is a much cheaper bike. And if you want to look at a used KLR, you can pick one up from $3,000 to $5,000, well equipped. They're out there. And you can obviously find used Africa Twins too, but in general, the KLR is going to be a cheaper bike. So if price is a consideration, that's something to think about. The KLR is a far less complicated machine. It is dead simple. Up until this last generation, it didn't even have fuel injection. I always say the KLR is a motorcycle, just a motorcycle, and nothing but a motorcycle. No bells and whistles, no ride modes, no ABS until the newest model, no traction control, none of that. It is a dead simple machine, and for some people that's a big plus, and for some people that's a big disadvantage, but all I'm saying is that it's a big difference between the two motorcycles. It's also a lot more approachable bike. The Africa Twin is not hard to ride, and it's not super intimidating. It has a pretty smooth power delivery, but in terms of which one is easier for a new rider to hop on and go, the KLR is a far more approachable bike. It's a lot more forgiving, it's a lot more beginner friendly, primarily because of two factors. It has a lot less weight, which I mentioned, and it has a lot less power, which is a disadvantage in some situations, but for a new rider, lower power means more forgiving, means less likely for an accident to be something super devastating. It's going to be easier to ride, more confidence inspiring. You're not going to have to worry about things like giving it too much throttle and spinning the back tire. It's pretty hard to do on the KLR, even when you're doing it on purpose. So it's just a more approachable, beginner friendly bike. So if you're a newer rider, the KLR might be a lot easier for you, in my opinion. So that's what the KLR does better. Here's what the Twin does better. Basically, if you're going to spend any time on the highway, and in particular if you're going to spend any time on the freeway at speeds of 75, 70, 75, 80, the Africa Twin wins hands down. It is more comfortable, the engine has more power, it's easier to cruise at those speeds. The windscreen is better. On my KLR, the windscreen likes to put the buffeting right here in the center of my head, which is very loud in my helmet. I didn't realize how good I had it on the Africa Twin until I switched to the KLR, so the Twin got the buffeting up over my head. The biggest difference for me is when I'm filming at highway speeds, the footage is useless on the KLR. But on the Africa Twin, I could at least talk and you could hear me because I was out of the wind a little bit better. It's just a more comfortable bike for cruising and eating up mileage. And I'm not saying the KLR won't do it. People out there will say that it doesn't do the freeway or the highway, and that's not true. But the Africa Twin is hands down more comfortable. It's no contest. It's definitely better. Like, it's not a subjective thing. It's a fact that the Africa Twin is better on the freeway than the KLR 650. This is subjective, but the Twin feels like a more expensive motorcycle in the way that getting into a BMW feels different than getting into a Honda, which is ironic in this case, but it just feels like a solid, well put together motorcycle. You know, the KLR is vibraty, the KLR rattles a lot, the old ones vibrate even more than the new ones. It's a great bike, it's solid, it's dependable, but it doesn't feel solid. That's hard to quantify, maybe that's just me, but you get on a Twin and you're just like, oh, this feels good. Like, this thing will take me anywhere. And you get on a KLR and you're like, feels like I'm flying a World War I biplane right now. It'll still fly. I'm confident in the engine, but it definitely has a different feeling to it. So subjectively, the Africa Twin feels like a more well put together bike to me. The Africa Twin has lots more features. If you want traction control, if you want ride modes, the newer bikes have it. You've even got a big, fancy tablet-like display on the new Africa Twins. Mine didn't have it. You've got traction control. You've got ABS that you can turn on and off. These are all features that only the Africa Twin has. Big difference between the two models. The KLR, like I said, is dead simple. Advantage to some, disadvantage to others. But if you want those electronics features, you're going to have to go with the Africa Twin. In terms of suspension adjustments, the Africa Twin is a little bit easier to do it on the fly because it has that little dial underneath the seat that you can just reach down and adjust it. So if your passenger hops on and you forgot to crank down the preload, you can just reach down and turn it. The newer models have an electronically adjusting suspension. They do it for you, which is even better. The KLR, it's not hard to adjust. I actually made a video on the KLR suspension adjustment, which I will link for you, but you do need some tools and you have to get off the bike to do it. I think the Africa Twin is a little bit more comfortable to stand up on, just in terms of where the peg placement is and sort of the shape of the tank. Admittedly, I had bar risers on my Africa Twin and I don't on my KLR, and my KLR is not uncomfortable to stand on. That's not what I'm saying, but if I had to pick one or the other, I preferred the standing position on the Africa Twin. I felt like I could stand up on it all day, and on the KLR, it's something I want to do when I'm in a rough section, but I don't want to do it all day as much. The KLR is very comfortable to sit on, though. That wide, flat seat gives it an advantage there, I feel like. And the nice thing about the Twin is it has so much more power, so if you need power without warning, say you come around a corner and you were not at all set up for the hill climb that suddenly appeared in front of you, you can twist the throttle on the Africa Twin and get what you need. Or you're riding down a road at a decent speed and you suddenly discover there's a big hole. If you want to get that front end up to get over it a little bit more smoothly than having to go down and through it, you can do that on the Africa Twin with a quick blip of the throttle. It's a lot harder on the KLR. It just doesn't have that throttle on demand. Just keep that in mind. Obviously, the Africa Twin has twice as much horsepower. There are many situations in which that is a big advantage. So that's all well and good. Those are the pros of each motorcycle. But what's the bottom line? Like, the question is, which one should I pick? And I think, like I always say, it depends. The KLR for me offers a psychological advantage. I probably wasn't ready for my Honda Africa Twin when I switched to it. I had some off-road riding experience on my CRF 250L, and so I thought I can handle a big adventure bike, but when I got started riding that thing around, it was so tall and so heavy that was all I could think about. My head was filled with, this is tall and heavy, this is tall and heavy. I'd take it off-road on anything remotely technical, and all I could think about was, oh my God, it would suck to drop this, or once it starts tipping, I'm not gonna be able to hold this up. It got me really, really in my head, and this could be me personally, I don't know. This video is about my opinion, so take it with a grain of salt, but I spent a lot of my time on the Africa Twin thinking about how heavy a bike it was. A lot of my time. And that hindered my confidence, which hindered my ability to ride. Because the most important skill for off-road riding is confidence. You have to believe that you're gonna be able to succeed. And if you spend time thinking about whether or not you're going to be able to, or doubting that you're gonna be able to succeed when you ride through, over, or around something, there's a good chance you won't succeed. And so, in that sense, the Africa Twin was a lot more than I think I was ready for at the moment. I have a shorter inseam, it's a heavy bike. I honestly wish I'd started on something like the KLR and built those big bike skills before moving up to the Africa Twin. The KLR feels lighter, and most importantly, it feels more like my dual sport. So I have a DRZ now, I had that 250L, and when I get on the KLR, I feel like I'm on a dual sport. When I got on my Africa Twin, I definitely felt like I was on an adventure bike, like on a bigger, heavier bike. And feeling more similar to the thing I'm confident on gives me more confidence. That's psychological, that's me, but it is true. That's a big difference between the two bikes in my mind. The KLR is a big dual sport. It feels like an adventure bike in a lot of ways. It's really a hybrid, but it is at its core a dual sport. The Africa Twin is at its core, and everywhere else, an adventure bike. It's an honest-to-goodness, big ol' adventure bike. If you're crushing a lot of highway miles, the Africa Twin is probably the better bike. If you're confident, and here's the big one, this is the big difference between the two for me. If you're confident that you can use the Africa Twin's superior momentum and power to get over and around and through obstacles, if you're confident in your head that you will commit, keep your feet on the pegs, twist the throttle, and trust that bike to get you to the top of whatever hill it is you're climbing, the Africa Twin is a better bike. If there's a doubt in your mind that you might do that, if you might get in your head about how heavy it is and hesitate, you will not succeed as well or at all on the Africa Twin and the KLR is maybe a better bike for you. I lacked that commitment during most of my time with the Africa Twin. I found it at the end on our BDR route because we had to ride through this pretty gnarly section out by Crescent Lake, but I spent most of my time on the Twin being afraid to make that commitment. The other big consideration with the Africa Twin is, can you afford it? If you can afford it, the Africa Twin is maybe a better bike for you. If you can't, go with the KLR because, you know, if you can't afford something, you can't buy it. And I'd rather have a bike I can afford that I can get out and ride than dream about riding one someday while I'm saving up. I don't know. Maybe that's bad financial advice, but this is the guy that buys motorcycles all the time. He can't afford, so don't listen to me when it comes to financial advice. However, if, like me, you want something lighter and easier to move around, something more confidence-inspiring, something more approachable, if you want to go to all the same places that an Africa Twin will take you, but save money and understand that you're just going to get there slower, if you're a new or an intermediate rider who is still building the confidence to commit to riding through difficult sections, maybe the KLR is a better bike for you. I am pretty happy with my KLR. I miss my Africa Twin on the freeway. I miss having ABS because my KLR doesn't have it. But other than that, I'm pretty dang happy with my decision. I feel very comfortable and confident on my KLR. I think it's a great bike and I'm excited to ride it for a while until I move on to whatever the next bike that I feel like I need is. Those are my thoughts on the KLR versus the Africa Twin. If you're considering one or the other, you know, take my advice with a grain of salt because the real determining factor should be your own opinion and your own feeling and your own confidence. Go sit on both bikes, go ride both bikes if you can. And the one that feels right to you, that you feel confident on, that's going to be the better motorcycle for you, no matter what some idiot with a Dork in the road sign above his head says on the internet. Seriously, you got to test it for yourself. So if you have any questions about owning and riding the KLR or the Africa Twin, please feel free to leave them in the comments. I know that subjectively on paper an Africa Twin is a better motorcycle, but I'm not talking about the paper stats. I'm talking about what it feels like to own and ride one. And I hope those insights were useful to you if you're trying to decide between these two bikes. Thank you for watching. I appreciate you, and please do not forget to be excellent to each other. Thank you.
Excellent!